It was April 9, 2005, in the Ozark Mountains, Missouri. Picture 12 children, ages 8 to 12, their helmets too big for their heads, fumbling with flashlights as they line up at the yawning black mouth of Devil's Den Cave. And honestly, with a name like Devil's Den, someone should have said no. But instead, a classroom walked straight into the Devil's living room. And yes, that decision was as stupid as it sounds. Leading them was 20-year-old Richard Hears, confident from past trips into the cave. He carried water, snacks, and a first aid kit. But what he didn't account for was the 15 pounds he'd gained since his last visit, a tiny difference in daily life. But in a cave where inches decide survival, it was a serious problem. The kids moved eagerly through the first passages, their helmet lights glowing like fireflies. Their small bodies slipped through gaps with ease. Richard followed, but with much more effort, twisting, flattening his chest, and forcing himself through. Each success made him more sure of himself, until that confidence turned into carelessness. Hours in, the group reached a vertical fissure, 10 inches wide, 6 feet high. On the other side was a slightly larger tunnel, and Richard remembered squeezing through here before. So, one by one, he sent the kids through. Their helmets scraped rock, their arms pressed to their sides, but all 12 emerged safely. Then, Richard tried. The walls clamped down immediately. His chest scraped one side, his back the other. He exhaled hard, inching upward, until halfway through. His hips locked, too wide. He tried forward, nothing. Backward, worse. He was stuck, wedged in limestone, blocking the only exit. On the other side, 12 children stared at their guide-turned barrier. Panic spread fast. Crying, trembling lights, and silence as the reality hit. If he couldn't move, none of them could leave. Above ground, the second instructor, Melissa Jones, waited in the sun, checking her watch, unaware the group below was already trapped in freezing dark. Hours passed. Richard told the children to huddle for warmth, but the cave's 55-degree chill stole their heat. Shivering grew violent, lips turned blue. Richard's legs dangled uselessly, circulation cut off, pain shooting through him. By the second hour, oxygen levels dropped. Headaches, dizziness, nausea spread. 2 of the youngest began nodding off, an early sign of hypothermia. It wasn't until 3 o'clock, the scheduled return time, that Melissa raised the alarm. By then, the cave had been winning for hours. Rescuers rushed in. Their first solution? Sledgehammers. Yes, swinging heavy tools in a cave packed with kids. Each blow echoed like thunder, dust swirling in flashlight beams, Richard flinching with every strike. One ranger even broke his own hand. Progress, none. Finally, a trained cave rescue team arrived. They worked differently, calm, precise. Nylon straps were slipped under Richard's arms, catching the glow of headlamps. He was lifted inches higher into a wider gap. His jeans were cut away, the extra bulk gone, and after 5 brutal hours, he slid free, collapsing in pain. But 12 children still waited. Carefully, rescuers pulled them out one by one, helmet lights bobbing as each was carried through the fissure. By nightfall, all 13 were on the surface again, shaken, freezing, but thank God, alive. The investigation later made it clear this wasn't bad luck. It was poor planning, overconfidence, and one reckless decision that nearly cost 13 lives. Devil's Den didn't need demons to earn its name. Just cold, unforgiving stone, and a moment of human stupidity. On December 27, 2003, 8 boys from the San Antonio Boy Village in Florida, plus 2 counselors, head out to explore Boy Scout Cave. Among them, 15-year-old Michael Shiro and 16-year-old Javik Henderson. The counselors stayed outside, not for laziness, but because they were too big to fit through the narrow entrance. Adults had gotten stuck there before, and no one wanted to make that kind of headline. The cave had a good reputation, dry, stable, and often explored by beginners without trouble. The boys brought 9 flashlights, no extra gear, and no training. Because when you're a teenager, a lack of preparation feels like part of the adventure. Inside, the temperature was a constant 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Not freezing, but cool enough to sap your warmth if you stayed still too long. To make things cozy, one counselor lit a fire near the entrance. Nobody realized that this small act would later spark a wave of panic. Around noon, Michael and Henderson led the group deeper inside, crawling and twisting through narrow stone corridors. About an hour in, they reached the hairpin curve. a notorious choke point that had trapped inexperienced cavers before. Neither boy knew its reputation. Michael went first, sliding into the tight L-shaped crack without checking the fit. The passage walls were a cruel mix of smooth rock and jagged edges. To pass, you had to contort your body just right, twisting shoulders and hips in sync. Henderson followed, and instantly regretted it. His shoulders jammed against the walls, his hips locked in place. Michael tried to help, but time was ticking. The cold rock pressed against their bodies, leaching away their heat. After about an hour of struggling, Michael passed out, a dangerous combination of exhaustion and cold. Henderson was now wedged in place next to an unconscious friend, his skin scraped raw, legs cramping, and lungs working harder from panic. In the wider section behind them, the other boys watched their flashlight beams grow dim. Some began to fear the fire outside was using up the oxygen. It wasn't, but fear doesn't wait for facts. They bolted back to the entrance, leaving Henderson shouting in the dark. The counselors were stunned when the boys emerged without the others. One called 911, the other put out the fire. Rescue teams arrived within the hour, carrying special tools. Inside, they found Henderson still stuck, shivering uncontrollably, and Michael limp and pale. The air quality was fine. The danger was the cold. Rescuers chipped away and widened the rock until Henderson could be pulled free. He was wrapped in a thermal blanket and carried to safety. Freeing Michael took nearly 2 more hours. His pulse was weak, his body temperature down to 92 degrees Fahrenheit, almost 7 degrees below normal. At that point, he was basically a human popsicle, but without the fun flavor. Wrapped in blankets, he was rushed to the hospital, where he remained unconscious for a full day. Henderson recovered more quickly, though covered in bruises and scrapes. The incident triggered new safety rules for youth caving groups in the region, because nothing says fun day out like having your near-death experience turned into a bullet point in a government safety brochure. On a cold, damp morning, the exact date lost to time, 3 experienced cavers, John Parker, Leo Sanchez, and Mike Barnes, set out to explore unmapped passages of Black Eagle Cave. This wasn't a casual stroll underground. The cave is a tight, unforgiving labyrinth with slippery walls, jagged rock, and drops that punish even small mistakes. The 3 were seasoned and well prepared, carrying ropes, lights, and the kind of confidence that only comes from years of crawling into dark holes in the earth. The passages started narrow and got meaner. They squeezed through wet stone, scraped along sharp ledges, and descended into deeper chambers. Then, during a steep, narrow drop, it happened. Mike stepped onto what looked like solid rock, only it wasn't. The stone snapped away under his weight, and his leg plunged into a wedge between 2 razor-sharp edges. His other leg slipped on the slick wall, pitching his body forward and wrenching the trapped limb into a twisted angle. The pain was instant, white-hot, and impossible to ignore. Leo and John rushed to help, but the cramped space made it impossible to pull him free without risking worse damage. Leo anchored a rope to Mike's upper body to stop him from sliding deeper. John squeezed in beside him, chest to rock, to hold him steady and chip away at the rock around his leg. It was grueling. Every movement sent pain shooting through Mike's body. He gritted his teeth, but the occasional shout echoed through the tunnel. The rock loosened little by little until finally his leg came free, swollen, twisted, and unusable. Getting out was its own battle. It took hours of lifting, bracing, and inching their way through the same unforgiving passages. When they finally reached daylight, they were exhausted, caked in mud, and carrying more adrenaline than they knew what to do with. Mike survived, but the injury left him limping for weeks. And with one firm lesson, in caves, solid rock is just a suggestion. March 2004, Puebla, Mexico. 6 British servicemen crawled into the Alpazat cave system near Quetzalan for what was supposed to be a 36-hour expedition. Instead, they ended up trapped underground for 8 days, sparking not only a major rescue, but also a full-blown diplomatic argument between Britain and Mexico. The men, Chris Mitchell, Jonathan Sims, Charles Milton, Simon Cornhill, John Rowe, and Toby Hamnet, were part of a 12-man military caving team called the Combined Services Caving Association. Officially, the trip was adventurous training. Unofficially, some locals quickly suspected something else. Not long after they entered the cave, heavy rains swept through the region. A flash flood surged into the caverns, turning their route out into a flooded death trap. The 6 retreated deeper inside, setting up camp on a 15-foot ledge ledge above a roaring underground river. Luckily, they were well prepared. Food supplies, water-powered lights, sleeping bags, even a portable stove. They cooked pasta with cheese, made instant chocolate cake, and waited. One man joked they had high morale but were incredibly bored. That boredom was serious. They literally made a deck of cards by tearing up paper into 52 pieces, because there's only so much instant cake you can eat underground. But the situation wasn't exactly stable. The first night, they listened to booming echoes as floodwater crashed through the tunnels. Some stripped to cope with the cave's heat and humidity. Others buried themselves in novels until they ran out of reading material by day 5. The rest of their team, safe above ground, hesitated for nearly 5 days before even calling Mexican authorities. That delay fueled rumors, but for the trapped men, communication never stopped. Using a radio system called a mole phone, they sent updates to the surface, waiting for real cave divers to come. Finally, on March 23rd, 2 British specialists, Richard Stanton and Jason Mallinson, arrived. These divers would later become famous in Thailand's 2018 cave rescue. Back in 2004, they were called in to bring the soldiers out one by one through a 300-meter flooded tunnel. Sims later described the moment Stanton appeared. "I remember feeling overjoyed when I saw his face. It was a great relief." Each trapped soldier was taught the basics of cave diving on the spot, fitted with scuba gear, and guided through the submerged passage in a grueling 45-minute journey. By March 24th, all 6 were free. No injuries, no fatalities, just exhaustion and enormous relief. But outside the cave, things were far less calm. Mexican officials were furious. Why had British soldiers been exploring caves in Mexico on tourist visas? Why did they refuse local rescue teams and insist on waiting for British divers instead? And most sensitive of all, were they really just caving, or were they surveying for uranium deposits hidden underground? President Vicente Fox even sent a formal letter to London, demanding answers. "We are asking the British government to tell us whether these people are military personnel, and if they are, what they are doing there." Rumors spread in the Mexican press that the men were scouting raw material for nuclear weapons. The Mexican energy minister even promised to send nuclear scientists into the caves after the rescue, just in case. British officials downplayed everything. It was a sporting trip, the Ministry of Defense insisted. Others argued the soldiers only refused local help because they were safe, in constant radio contact, and didn't want to cause chaos above ground. In the end, all 12 men were allowed to leave Mexico and return home. Officially, the case was closed, but the Alpazat rescue left behind a strange legacy, a survival story of 6 men eating cake on a cave ledge, mixed with Cold War-style paranoia about uranium hunting in the mountains of Puebla. 4 caves, and in each one, the same pattern: overconfidence, bad planning, and a cave that had been waiting for centuries to prove a point. If you enjoyed watching people nearly get crushed, frozen, or internationally detained, you can escape easily. Hit subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. The only cave safe to enter is this one.